Hi, I'm Miss Haley with the Huntsville-Madison County Public Library. And for today's craft, I'm going to show you how to make this super cute paper bag Wookie puppet. So to make this puppet, you are going to need, let's put our Wookie right there where we can see him. You are going to need a pencil, a pair of scissors, a glue stick, a paper bag. This is just a small paper lunch sack. And 2 colors of construction paper. You're going to need a light brown or tan color and a dark brown. This is more of a medium brown, but it is darker than my tan, and that is what is important. You can use any shade of brown that you really want for this. It's up to you. These are the 2 colors I have on hand, but the important thing is that you have a lighter brown and a darker brown for this craft. So to start out, we are going to take our lighter color, and we are going to take our paper bag, and we're going to line that paper bag up with this edge, which you can barely see. Let me put this actually under there so you can see it better, because that is almost the same color as my table. There we go. So we're going to line it up with this edge, the corner, and this top edge. So we're going to line this side of the paper bag up, and the corners are going to meet at the corner. And the top edge is lined up. And then we are going to take our pencil and we're just going to draw a line right down that edge so that we have our paper divided. And that is almost exactly in half. That might actually be 6 inches. So we're going to cut that out right along that line. We're going to set aside the piece that is not going to be used. So we're just going to set that aside. And this will be our piece for part of our Wookie. Now we're going to set that aside for now, and we're going to do the same thing on our brown paper. We are going to line up our edges and line up our top and draw a line. I really feel like that's almost exactly in half of that paper, but your paper bag may not be the same as mine, so you'll still do it this way. Cut along that line that you drew. Set aside the half you're not using. Don't throw that away. You can always use that for either another Wookie puppet or for something else, some other craft that you might have that you need paper for. So next, we are going to take our, and again, I'm going to put the brown under it so you can see what I'm doing here. We're going to take our tan piece and we are going to line up, actually I'm going to do it this way. So I'm going to hold the paper bag down and then I'm going to pull it up so I can see this under flap. We're going to make sure it's lined up at the bottom there and then press it down, and I'm going to draw a line right here along the top. So that basically gets us this little square measurement right here. And then I'm going to round that off. So I don't want to go really high because I do need some of this other paper. And we might have to dip into our extra piece of paper for this. But we're just going to give it a rounded shape. So I'm going to draw from one corner to this other end of this line that I just drew. And I'm going to round it off. So just kind of a round shape for our Wookie's head. I'm going to go a little higher. And it doesn't matter if you see these pencil lines because that is going to be the back side. So when you glue this guy down, you're just going to make sure that that is on the back of your Wookie puppet. Actually, I think I want to go a little higher. I'm just looking at my other Wookie there, and he's got a decently tall forehead. There we go. So I'm going to cut along this upper line I made, and you might need to do what I did and make a couple lines until you feel like you have your Wookie's forehead shaped the way you want it. And we have my Wookie's head. So now I'm going to cut in a straight line just along this edge. I'm going to try to save as much paper as I can, because I definitely want these. Let's see how long or how big are those. I don't think I have enough space. So we're going to cut about 2 inches of paper. So I've got 2 inches here, and we're going to discard this one piece. So you have a 2-inch strip of paper, and then I'm going to come and I'm going to use my second piece, which, let me check, it is pretty much as wide as the other one. I'm going to do the same thing, cut about 2 inches. If you want to use a ruler, you can. You do not have to, though. 2 inches is about 3 of my fingers. If you have a smaller hand than mine, if you don't have a grown-up hand, it might be 4 fingers wide. All right, and now we are going to take our big piece, and first we are going to cut off 2 2-inch strips. So 2 more of those, and they really don't have to be perfect. So, like that, and then we're going to cut off a 3-inch one. So we want it to be like that, but just a little bit longer. So right about like that. And you guys can see, I'll hold up the smaller of the strips. You can see that this is about 1 inch bigger than the smaller strips. So when you are done, you should have 2 2-inch strips of tan or light brown, 2 2-inch strips of dark brown, and 1 3-inch strip, 3 inches this way, of dark brown, and then 1 Wookie head. Do you have all that? If so, we're going to move on to the next step. And the next step is cutting some fringe. So to cut a fringe, you're just going to start cutting up along here. We're going to do our Wookie's head, just the bottom straight edge of it. And you're just going to make these little cuts. You're not actually cutting anything off. You're just cutting up into the paper. So that it forms a fringed edge, kind of like Wookie hair. So now we have this fringed edge. You can move it around a little bit if you want it to be, I mean, a Wookie is not exactly well groomed usually. So if you want it to be a little rougher, just kind of play with it a little bit. Be gentle though. It's very easy to rip one of these off. We don't want to pull our Wookie's hair out. So set that aside, and you're going to do the same thing to all of the others, just on one edge, okay? So just on one. I'm actually lining up my two strips here, and I'm going to start fringing them at the same time, just along one edge. So we're not going to do any other edges. We're not going to do both sides. Just this one section. And I am not cutting very far up. I'm cutting a little bit less than halfway up my strip on these strips so that I still have a lot of room up here, and that's so that we can glue them down really easily. We're going to set those aside, and we're going to do the same thing to our dark brown strips. Again, I'm only going to cut about halfway to less than halfway, just less, slightly less than halfway up these strips as I'm cutting my fringe. And your cuts don't have to be all the same. Some may be longer than others and some may be shorter, and that is fine. They may be different widths. You may have some really tiny narrow ones. You may have some really thick ones. They might be slightly angled. All of that is okay. So we're going to set those aside. We're going to do the same thing on this one, again, only on one edge. And I'm going to pick this edge right here because it is slightly not straight. If you guys, I don't know if you guys can tell on the camera, but this side is a little bit longer than this side, but that's okay. So we're going to cut that right here, and cutting the fringe on any side that might be uneven will also help you hide that if you care. You may not care, and that's fine too. And I'm cutting about the same length of fringe that I did on the smaller pieces. So yeah, not very far up. On this one, you don't want to go halfway. just the same amount that you did on the little one. So it'll be a little bit less of that paper. All right, so next what we are going to do is we are going to start, and this is actually a reverse colored Wookie. I decided when I made this one, I had the 3 strips of tan and then 2 of the dark brown, but I decided I liked more contrast between his head and this first set of fur, and so we went with a different pattern there. But you're going to start at the bottom of your paper bag. Gosh. So we're going to start at the bottom of this paper bag, and you're going to line your fringe up with the bottom of it, and then you're going to glue it down. And we may have some excess because when we make our mark, it was not an exact measurement. We'll trim that off at the end. So if your strip is a little too long for your paper bag, like if you look at mine, it's a little over the edge there. Make sure all of the extra length goes off to the same side. So I'm going to put all of my extra length towards the top. Also, if you have your paper bag, you may notice on mine, there's this overlap here. So that's where the top part overlaps this bottom part. I do not want to glue down onto this bottom part, so I'm going to be careful to only glue to the top part of the bag. So just keep that in mind if you're looking at your bag and you have that same overlap. Not all paper bags are going to have that. It depends on how they're made and how they're folded. So we are going to start by using our glue, and we're going to put a lot of glue all over the back part of that strip, not on the fringe, because we don't want to glue our fringe down. We want our fringe to be free to be fringy. So we're going to line our fringe up with the bottom of the bag, like that, and we're going to glue that down, press it down. All right. Next, we're going to add a light brown strip. And when we add this one, we're going to glue it down so that the solid part that we didn't fringe is glued down to the paper bag, and the fringe is overlapping the solid part of this one. So the part that's not fringed here will be covered by the fringe. So you really kind of want to line your bottom of your fringe up with where your fringe ends on this one, if that makes sense. So again, we are going to put a lot of glue on the back of our strip, but again, not on the fringe. At no point do you want to glue down your fringe on this one. And we're going to line it up so that it's lined up with the edge of the top part of my paper bag, and the fringe is mostly lined up with the bottom of this fringe. That's pretty good. Like that. And we're going to do this again. So now we're doing a dark brown. Same exact process. Glue on the part that is not fringed. Lay the fringe over the not fringed part of the piece before it, and glue it down. And again, all that excess, you can see how it overlaps a little. I'm keeping it towards one side so it's all coming up to the top. So I don't have any excess down here. That way I only have to trim one side when I do trim it. And you don't have to trim it either. If you don't want to do that, you can skip that step. So now we're going to do the same thing with our last tan strip. I'm going to do it this way because there's a little pencil mark here. And I want my pencil mark to face down. If you have any pencil marks or pen marks, always try to face those down. All right, like that. See, that one doesn't have any overlap. And then for our last one, we're going to tuck it under this flap. So we're going to lift this flap up, and we're going to glue it down right here. We do not want to glue it on top of this flap because this flap is what's going to form the mouth and the head, so you can make your paper bag puppet talk. So I like to go ahead and line it up and see where it comes. So it doesn't need to go all the way up. When you're moving your paper bag puppet, you're not necessarily going to see all the way up in there. So I'm going to adjust it down a little bit, and we're doing the same thing where the fringe of this one ends is about where I want this one to start. So about right there. So again, I'm going to put glue all over the non-fringy part of this big piece. And then I'm going to glue him down right there. Now, depending on how wide you cut your strips here and where you fringe them to, you might come all the way up to this fold, and that's okay. If you're coming past that fold, trim a little bit off the top of this piece because you don't want to interfere with that fold, but it's okay if you come all the way up to it, and it's okay if you fall short like I did too. This is not an exact science sort of craft. So now, under here, we want to make sure we know where our underside is. I'm going to make a tiny little pencil mark where that underside is. So tiny you can't hardly see it. But we are going to draw a mouth on here. So I'm just going to draw it on the brown, I think. And then if I want to, if I think I need to, and I'm making sure I'm not coming below that pencil mark, that way his mouth won't show on the underside of that flap, and we're going to color that in black. And depending on how my puppet works, once I'm making him talk and stuff, I might bring his mouth up further. If you can see that, I might go ahead and take his mouth up a little further onto the paper bag itself. I'm just not sure if I want to do that yet or not. Okay, so for this last part, we are going to glue down the head, and the head is going to glue down to this. So you want to be careful. You can't just put glue all over the back of the head like we did on the strips, because some of it will come off this side, some of it might overlap with this. We don't want to glue his mouth together. So for this step, you're actually going to put the glue on the paper bag itself. So we're going to put glue all over our paper bag. You may have to lift as you glue. There's a lot of edges that are going to want to catch on your glue stick on the underside of your paper bag. So just kind of lift as you're gluing down. And then you're going to line this up where you want it. I want mine to overlap just a little bit on the fringe. So even though my head's going to not cover the corners, that's okay. I'm fine with that. I could even trim those off if I wanted to, but I don't think I'm going to bother. And we have our body for our paper bag Wookie. So now we just need to give him a face. You can give your Wookie any kind of face you want. But if you want to do the kind that I gave this one, you're going to decide where your nose is going to go. And you're going to draw a little oval, a sideways oval. So that's his nose. And then we want his nose to be a little pointy at the bottom. So from the edges of your sideways oval, you're just going to bring it down into a point like that. And then you'll color that in. Like that. So his eyes are just two circles. So you're going to do a big circle here and a big circle here. And I left two little circles on the inside. Now, the little circles, you want to draw them a little bigger than you want them to end up if you are using a Sharpie, because a Sharpie bleeds, and so it's going to wind up smaller than it looks when you first draw it. So I'm going to draw a little circle on the inside of both of his eyes, like that. And when I'm filling in, it's going to shrink a little bit because the Sharpie is going to bleed. If it doesn't shrink as much as I want it to, I can always add some Sharpie. You can always make those smaller by adding more Sharpie around them. You can't make them bigger. So if you start too small, you're just going to wind up with two small circles. So we're going to color our eyes in. And I'm going to smooth out one edge. It bled in one spot more than another, and so it made a knot circle. So I just smoothed out that edge. we're going to do the other one. If you want to use a black marker instead of a Sharpie, you can do that as well. Sometimes washable markers don't bleed as badly as a Sharpie does, but sometimes they do, so just keep that in mind. Okay, there are 2 eyes. Now, if you want to give him some fuzzy eyebrows, I like to actually do a line where I want the eyebrow, and then another line. So he's going to have this kind of questioning look on his face, and then I just go back and forth on that line. Oh, you can't see that. Let's see. See it now? Yeah. So I just go back and forth on that line to make it fuzzy. And now we are done with our Wookie puppet. To puppet your Wookie puppet, you just open him up and put your hand there, and then you can move him around, which is hard to show on this camera. But I hope you guys have fun with your Wookie puppets. We would love to see what you come up with. You can add all sorts of decorations to your Wookie puppet. You can do a different face. You could give him the bandolier that some Wookiees have. It's entirely up to you how you make your Wookie puppet. We would love to see what you come up with. And you can show those to us on our Facebook page, which is Huntsville Madison County Public Library. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.